Eu trabalho na assessoria internacional e vou fazer as apresentações do palestrante dessa manhã. Primeiro de tudo, eu queria falar um pouco sobre as instituições, né? Tem um textinho preparado, vou ler, que eu acho que é melhor. Fundada em 2010 em Bristol, a Study Abroad UK representa universidades britânicas do Brasil, promovendo oportunidades na área educacional a estudantes que queiram ingressar em universidades inglesas. Com os escritórios da Inglaterra e do Brasil, a Study Abroad UK oferece uma vasta lista de programas de estudo no exterior, em níveis de graduação, pós-graduação e estágios em grandes universidades da Inglaterra. A Study Abroad UK está aqui representada pelo senhor Alzé Fulco, que está aqui à direita de vocês. Ele é brasileiro e está radicado na Inglaterra há 20 anos. É pernambucano, né, Alzé? Isso. Pernambucano, olindense, mas mora na Inglaterra há 20 anos. Aqui também temos a presença da delegação da Anglia Ruskin University, que está localizada em Cambridge, representada pelo professor Dr. Salmon, aqui à esquerda de vocês, e também por Alejandra, que é lá da Universidade, ela é chilena, e acompanha essa delegação. E o Salmon, ele é diretor da Faculdade de Artes, Direito e Ciências Sociais. E hoje ele vai proferir a palestra intitulada ALSS, The Creative Cambridge Experience, Research, Vocation and Employability. Como vocês já devem saber, né, foi colocado no anúncio do evento, a palestra será proferida toda em língua inglesa. Caso vocês tenham alguma dificuldade na hora que forem abertas as perguntas, tiverem dificuldades para fazer a pergunta para o professor, eu posso ajudá-los. Tá certo? Então, feitas as devidas apresentações, passo a palavra ao professor Dr. Salmon.
Thank you very much. Closer. Is that okay? Yeah? Can you hear me? Cool. Thank you very much. I am the Deputy Dean of the Faculty of Arts, Law and Social Sciences at Anglia Ruskin in Cambridge. I'm working on the basis that some of you will be interested in arts and law and social sciences. Some of you won't be. You'll just be here because this is somebody from England and there's the opportunity to think more about studying abroad. So what I'm going to try and do is use our areas of specialism to talk about things that I think are true no matter what you're studying. The big idea behind the talk really is to think about how, being where we are now, the times we're living in, what fantastic opportunities there are for studying abroad, and why one should think carefully about it and how you should go about it. Because I think there are a series of really practical things that I'd like to focus on. I'll use art because that's what I do. My background is writing and film and television. So that's what I know about. But everything that I'm talking about, I would hope you can apply to anything else. Okay. So if you're not an artist, don't in the first few minutes think, oh, it's about art. I'll think about something else in the next 20 minutes. Just stick with it, and I will try and make it relevant. I'd like to begin by introducing the rather grand Victorian gentleman on the left. He's John Ruskin, a very famous English. It's hard to know what to call him. In England, we would call him a polymath. Polymath means somebody who is gifted in many areas. He was an artist. He was also a botanist, study of plants. He was also a geologist, study of rocks. He was also an environmentalist, a politician, and a social campaigner. So Ruskin was a polymath, somebody who was interested in many, many things. He founded the Cambridge School of Art, that old building on the right, which was the start of our university. The Cambridge School of Art still exists. It's within my faculty, Art, Law and Social Sciences. It's one of the departments, and it's very, very good. But the interesting point is, why did Ruskin found it? He founded the School of Art because he was obsessed by drawing. Now, if I asked you to define drawing, when you draw something, just think in your heads for a moment, how would you define it? What is drawing? What description would you give to it? Any suggestions? I know it's an unusual question, but what is drawing? Sorry, sit.
I don't know, gallery? I would think of precious metals or
Okay,
gold.
sure, okay. Thank you.
Use the imagination.
Use of the imagination. Ruskin's definition goes like this. And it's quite close to that point about use of the imagination. Ruskin said, the greatest thing a human soul ever does in this world is to see something and tell what it saw plainly. Hundreds of people can talk for one who can think, but thousands can think for one who can see. To see clearly is poetry, prophecy, religion, politics, all in one. So for Ruskin, drawing is about seeing. But it doesn't just mean seeing in that sense of this is what this thing looks like. It means seeing with your imagination. It means completely understanding something. And in Ruskin's case, he said that in one of his first books. It's called Modern Painters, and it was written in 1847. And Ruskin wrote Modern Painters because he had a house full of paintings by this man, Joseph Turner. Turner is now one of England's most famous painters. He has a whole gallery in London built by the government devoted to him. His paintings sell for millions and millions of pounds. When Ruskin started writing about Joseph Turner, Ruskin was the only man in England who owned Turner paintings. Everybody else thought they were rubbish. He had a house full of Turner paintings, and nobody else would buy them. Because people said, well, one person said, actually, a famous painting critic said, it's a mess. that one at the top is called Rain, Wind and Speed. And it's about, I don't know if you can see it, it's a train crossing a viaduct, a big bridge, during a storm. And the Victorian public thought this was awful, because it doesn't really look like a train crossing a viaduct during a storm. The other one, even more famous, is a wreck of the Trafalgar. This is a boat called the Trafalgar burning at sea after a storm. And Victorian England thought these paintings looked awful. And Ruskin set out on a campaign to convince Britain that actually Turner was great, not awful. And he succeeded. And the point of why did Ruskin think Turner was great? Because he said that in these paintings you can see the motive power and force of nature. Now to you and I, this is not a new thought. But in 1847, Victorian England thought that they could control absolutely everything. They owned large chunks of the world. They were incredibly arrogant about themselves and about their own powers. And Turner's paintings are really saying, people are very small, nature is very big. So, I think Ruskin liked Turner because Turner really had something to say. He saw it plainly, and he said it. And then he wanted to communicate it to other people. Now, I'll come on to the relevance of that to us in a moment. But before I do, I just want to ask you another question. If I said to you, what was your favourite building in the whole world, what would you say? Just chat amongst yourselves for a second and come up with one. Your favourite building in the whole world is which? And why? Maybe that nobody's ever asked you this question ever before. No, it's an odd question, isn't it? But anybody got one? Very good choice. Why?
Because it's very complex and complicated. There are a lot of
Yep.
and figures, but it's also very light.
Yes.
It looks like place almost.
Yep. And it's a fantastic building, isn't it? Really, really, really good choice. Notre Dame Cathedral. Any others? A really, really good explanation as well. Ruskin's favourite building was this one. This is St. Mark's Cathedral in Venice. And Ruskin thought this was the most beautiful building in the world. Now, I mean, I wouldn't say it is, because which is the most beautiful building in the world, you go on forever and ever. There'd be loads of reasons why people would think this one or this one or this one or this one. But Ruskin's reasons are quite interesting. He spent years studying this building. He gave lectures on it. Having convinced the British public that Turner was a fantastic painter, he then went out to try and convince them about architecture. Because at the time in Victorian Britain, people had a lot of money for building really horrible buildings. Very ugly. None of those beautiful things that you just said. They were just ghastly, but wealthy. And Ruskin tried to get Britain, including the British government, to understand about architecture. He wrote a book called The Stones of Venice to do that. In order to write The Stones of Venice, Ruskin made himself a nuisance, really, to the Venetian authorities. He let them, convinced them to let him climb up into the galleries. He took hundreds of paintings of the place. He even made a plaster sculpture of the whole building. Because in order to see something clearly, you have to understand it. So there was no way he was going to tell people about St. Mark's until he'd really got a grasp of what the building was. This it cost him thousands of pounds of his own money. It also cost him part of his own health. He fell through the roof twice and had to be hospitalised, and then came back to do the same thing all over again. But the whole point is, as far as he was concerned, this was the most beautiful building in the world because he said it was harmonious. He said the building is a perfect example of order and symmetry. You start in this shop with us, all those people, quite small, in St. Mark's Square. That then builds into the first set of arches, which builds into the second set of arches, which builds into, finally, the dome. He said it was an example of perfect balance. But the reason for this is not just about things looking pretty. He said the point of art is to connect artistic values with moral laws, to suggest an underlying harmony in the universe. Now, an underlying harmony in the universe that's all about how things add together, rather like a building. And if you're thinking about doing some form of international experience, the first practical thing I think you need to do is for yourself, think, where is the underlying harmony? Rather like, imagine yourself rather like one of those little people standing in St. Mark's Square. How does what I do in terms of this link into the next arch, link into the next arch, connect to some final set of purposes? One way of doing that is to look carefully at your options. Now, this is like the second practical thing. And as I said, this applies to art because this is what we do. But it could apply to anything else. It could apply to engineering, it could apply to social sciences, it could apply to physics and chemistry. The first practical thing I'd say for you to do is look carefully at the combination of subjects that are offered. And particularly if you're thinking about doing year abroad programs, how can you make a set of choices that add up? At the moment, and one of the reasons I'm here and grateful for being here, is we have 19 Science Without Borders students in my faculty at the moment. They arrived in January, they are absolutely fantastic. They are a huge credit as ambassadors for Brazil. They're just wonderful people. They could choose any subject, any set of subjects they wanted to do, because that's part of the programme. And we want them to choose whatever they want to do, because that's exciting, it's marvellous. We want them to make the most of it. However, some of the choices that they made initially were a bit bonkers. And there wasn't any underlying harmony to them. So we sat down and we said, look, if you do this, this, and this, it won't add up. It won't come to something. So my first thing is, think carefully about how the things add up. What's the underlying harmony? And for us, there's an underlying harmony to these things. It's all about making stuff. Like Ruskin, we believe that you understand things by doing them. You understand things by making them. You understand things by turning an idea into a physical something. All our courses do that. That's our underlying idea. And when you're thinking about any particular university, because I know you've got hundreds to choose from, when you look at their material, is the underlying idea obvious? Because it should be. They should know why they're doing what they're doing. It doesn't matter what the idea is, you choose the one that fits you. But that's the point. Another thing you need to think carefully about is the place. Now, Anglia Ruskin is based in Cambridge. How many of you have heard of Cambridge, just as a name? Just raise your hands if you've actually heard it. Yeah, quite a lot of you. That's good. That makes me feel happy at home. That's great. How big do you think it is? Give me a number. What is it? Is it 50,000, 100,000, 300,000 people, a million people? What do you imagine it to be? No idea. Any suggestions? Big city? Small city? Big city? Yeah. Now, for you, tell me in Brazilian terms, what's a big city as far as you're concerned? To me, most of your cities seem quite big, but for you, what is a large city? Yeah. Sao Paulo's massive, isn't it? How many millions are in Sao Paulo? How many? 11? That's enormous. Absolutely enormous. Cambridge only has I'm proud of this because I'm one of them. So it only has 150,000 residents. So, famous name, place you've all heard of, actually, it's a small place. By your terms, it's a small place. It's very old, it's 800 years old, so it's full of beautiful buildings like the one at the top, the Bridge of Sighs. But it's quite a small place. It's famous though because it has big ideas. That's what it's famous for, its ideas. Many, many, many famous people. One of them, Charles Darwin. What's he famous for? Yes. Evolution, natural selection, in his book, Evolution of the Species. Charles Darwin's idea about evolution is basically this. You start, if you imagine it, with something over here, simpler than a chimpanzee. You then move on to things like chimpanzees, you then move on to things that are bigger, like gorillas, you then move on to things like that, to Neanderthal humans, and then from there you finally evolve to people like us. That's the basic theory. Evolution is about starting with an origin of something, way over here, and moving further and further away from it through time. Ruskin's big idea was the exact reverse. Ruskin talks about involution, which is also a word in English. It means how you involve something. So instead of moving further and further away from the origin, you bring things back together again. So, Ruskin said that in order to study botany, you need to know about plants. You also need to know about geography, about landscape. You also need to know about human behaviour, so you need to know about politics and economics. Involution, how things are pulled together and relate to each other. Whereas the Darwin idea is actually a basis, it's how you grow away from where you began from. Ruskin's idea is how do you pull things in from back here, from here, from here, from here, into forming something which has some sort of integrity. In Cambridge, this means that the old and the new exist side by side together. Cambridge is also famous because it's one of the world's research hubs for new technology. Microsoft Europe is based in Cambridge in that building there. So we have the very old and the very new. So, my next tip, in terms of thinking about study abroad, having said think carefully about the courses, think carefully about the place. It makes a massive difference. Now, there's no right or wrong answer to this. I'd love you all to come to Cambridge, that would be fantastic. But I'm not talking about that. What I'm saying is, choose the place that's the one that actually works for you. But research it first. Somewhere like Cambridge is very specific. If you want to live in a beautiful old town, which blends the old and the new, has 150,000 residents, well, 149,999 at the moment, but also has 40,000 students. Cambridge is an ideal place to go. I love it. All the students make a huge difference. My faculty, Arts, Law and Social Sciences, has 357 international students out of 3,000, so 10% of our faculty is international. That's great. I'm proud of that. But the thing I'm really proud of, the thing that cheers me up on bad days, we have those 357 students come from 83 different countries. There are only 257 countries in the world. That's marvellous. And it's great for the students because actually everybody is from everywhere. Which means that everybody's really friendly because you just have to be. And the whole of Cambridge is like that. So think carefully about your place. Research it. Don't just think, oh, anywhere in Britain they're all the same. They're not. Or anywhere in Australia they're all the same. Or anywhere or in Holland. They're not all the same. Find out about the one that is the good fit for you. The next thing I'd say is research the people. These are four of my friends. These are professors from my faculty. One of the things I'd say about, if you're thinking about studying abroad, is get on the web, find out about what the people do. It's easily visible nowadays. Find out what their research interests are. Because, okay, they may be teaching an undergraduate course, but their research interests tell you the sorts of things that they're going to be excited about. And find out what the underlying idea is behind their research. In our case, it goes back to what I was saying about John Ruskin. We're interested in evolution, things that pull different things together. That's our big idea. And things that make a big social difference. That's our other big idea. So, in Professor Barra Mendelssohn's case, she researches the relationship between literature and science. Imagination in literature, imagination in science. How do the two things work? I've gone forever about all of them. I'll just choose another one. The lady just down, Professor Helen O'Donnell-Miller. She's a music therapist. She's one of Europe's leading music therapists. Music therapy is an amazing thing. In people who have had strokes or have got senile dementia, aging, or are autistic, locked inside themselves without language. Verbal language is one of the first things to go. One of the first things the brain gets rid of when it's traumatized is the ability to speak. One of the last things the brain gets rid of, in fact it's almost the last, this lasts even longer than the capacity to eat, is the ability to respond to music. So music therapy, a marvellous thing. It's all about how you unlock people who are trapped inside themselves through music. Help them to communicate through music. If you're interested in this thing, just go on YouTube and click in music therapy, Anglia Ruskin, and you'll see, and Helen's videos are just incredible, just for general interest's sake. But the point is, it crosses over between arts and science, and just like Ruskin taught us at the beginning for us as a university, it's about how you do things to make things happen. Also part of that interrelationship is, in England's case, if you're thinking of doing a study abroad in England, I'll say something slightly controversial. Personally, when I was speaking to somebody who comes from Liverpool, a town in the north of England, marvellous place, I think it's great. But if I was doing a study abroad, if I was coming to the UK for 1 year, I would only go to somewhere that was within very close distance of London. London is a world city. Not as big as Sao Paulo, only 7 million people. 1 in 5 people in the UK live in Greater London. If you're interested in the creative industries, London is the second largest creative industry hub in the world. The largest is Los Angeles, the second is London. The great thing about being in Cambridge is that you are 45 minutes from London on the train. There's a train every 15 minutes, so you can really enjoy living in Cambridge, but you don't, and get into London with ease. You don't have to then live in London, which is actually a very expensive place to live. Transport takes a long time. The great thing about London is going and seeing stuff in it, I think, not living in it. Neither is it particularly friendly. If any of you have ever been to London and witnessed how actually people sit on a tube without saying a word, whereas places like Cambridge are much more friendly. So I would very definitely, thinking that your year, you want to make the most of it, you want to build your architecture as well as possible. I wouldn't contemplate going anywhere that wasn't actually close to London, because you're going to miss so much. Who are these two people? Well, four people. Who's the gentleman with the earring? Shakespeare. Yeah. Who are the others? The Beatles. Our most famous writer, and I think still our most famous pop group. I've included these two slides for one reason. They both share something with John Ruskin. In both cases, they are people who are, if you like, imaginative doers. And they came from very ordinary beginnings. Shakespeare didn't come from some great family. Shakespeare's first mention anywhere, in any records, his father was arrested for stealing deer. And Shakespeare and that was a very serious crime in the 1570s. So Shakespeare, who we think was an accessory to the crime and actually helped his dad nick the deer, had to do a runner to London as fast as possible to get out of harm's way. He turned up in the theatre, and Sir Robert Greene, who was then the director of the Theatre of London, said, "Who is this upstart crow?" He thought Shakespeare was just some riffraff. Exactly the same was true of the Beatles. They started in a very ordinary city. They had very ordinary origins. When they first performed, Sir Noel Coward, who was the equivalent in many ways, Sir Robert Greene, who was the sort of aristocracy of the theatre, went to a Beatles performance. This is in 1965. He said this: "The noise was deafening. I couldn't hear a word or a note, just one long ear-splitting din. Impossible to judge if they have any talent." His friend, Paul Johnson, writing in the Sunday Times, the Sunday afterwards, said that he was far more damning. He said the Beatles represent a bottomless chasm of vacuity. In other words, they're completely useless. When Ruskin published one of his first books on art and economy, it was banned because there was an uproar in Victorian England about what he was saying. In Shakespeare's case, he really had something to say. His idea was this: what if the king is rubbish? That's basically Shakespeare's big question. Time and time again, in Shakespeare's plays, the King of England is presented as that, or the king who happens to be the king of Egypt or wherever is presented as actually completely beyond the pale. Shakespeare was doing this for very political reasons. Elizabeth I, who was the queen, not the king, knew this. She said, "I am Shakespeare's fool." No, you're not. She thought Shakespeare was awful, but she couldn't chop his hands off or behead him or anything else because he was never writing about her. He was always writing about other places: ancient Egypt, Rome, Verona, anywhere that wasn't modern London, but of course it's all about modern London. Shakespeare also asks some other really interesting questions, like, what if women are cleverer than men? That's one of Shakespeare's constant questions. The women in his plays are often brighter than the men. What if young people want to marry because they love each other rather than because arranged marriage is for money because of their parents, Romeo and Juliet? Asking real questions. The Beatles asked real questions as well. They asked real questions about sex, they asked real questions about love, they asked real questions about drugs, they asked real questions about what is the imagination. The Britain that they were living in wasn't quite ready for it. But the point is this, the point of the stories is really simply this. When you're thinking about your year abroad, have the courage to ask yourself real questions. You want it to change your life, otherwise it's not worth bothering. There's no point travelling 10,000 miles, all that time on an aeroplane, time away from your family, cost, etc., unless you're going to really make it work for you. Now, every individual has a different set of real questions, but work out what yours are. That's incredibly important. Also, think carefully about what you're going to gain from the place you're going. One of the things for us, it's a big part of what we do, is we work in partnership with lots and lots of companies. But in our case, lots of festivals, lots of creative companies, lots of venues, because we want to give the students lots of opportunities to do further stuff, to do internships, to do work, to learn through doing, like Ruskin told us to, and that's not just about doing the course. So when you ask yourself a set of real questions, ask yourself, what is the university going to provide for me beyond just the course? It's a massively important question, because you don't just want to go to England, for instance, to study stuff that's in the book. You've got, I've seen it this week, you've got fantastic universities in Brazil. You've got fantastic professors. You're not going to gain anything by just going and reading the same books in another country. What you need to do is actually think, what's the value added? And that's actually about working in partnership, connecting up with other people, connecting up with English people. And we're a funny bunch, but kind of like make the most of us for the year that you'll be connecting with us. I'll leave that one. These are probably also things that you recognise. They're made at L Street Film Studios, which is just down the road from Cambridge. One of the things we do is film and television, and we have very strong links with film and television in the region and in London. And our students work very closely with the film and television industries. But the point is this. It doesn't matter whether it's film and television. Whatever it is you're thinking of going for, where is the expertise? Choose somewhere that's known for something and that's actually really good at something. You don't want to go all that way to spend time with mediocrity. One way of testing that out, and this is just a very practical tip, this is a picture of Tim Sidel Rodriguez. Tim is a film producer who works within our film department, has many credits on lots of famous films. What I would say is before you choose your year abroad place, after you've done the research and the thinking that we've just been talking about, contact the people. If they haven't got time to talk to you, that tells you something. If they have, you will find out, Skype them, phone them up, have your list of questions, and that is the quickest way to get beyond the brochures, because all brochures are advertising. What you need to do is move beyond that into meeting real people. Now, I've included this slide partly because we've got a theatre, it's part of what we do, but also because I think it's a very good summary of what your year abroad should do for you. I asked you a while ago about, we advised you, what's your favourite building? I asked you earlier, what's your image of drawing? Because I'm an artist, I think of the world in visual terms. That's how I see things. I'd like you to think about this just for a second as a potential image for your own life. Imagine that your life is a play. It's a play that you were going to write. You're also going to act in it. You're also going to direct it, and produce it, and probably review it. And at odd moments in your life, and if this hasn't happened to you yet, I'm sure it will, you will have the strange experience of finding yourself as an audience in your own life, watching somebody else, who is probably you, doing something, thinking, what on the earth is going on? How is this happening to me? So then I can see from your faces, some of you have already had that experience. There is that thing of actually being an onlooker in the thing that's your life. Shakespeare said, all of life's a stage in which one person plays many parts. Now, that's true for you, it's true for me. The point behind it is this. In the things I've been talking about, what I've really been saying is that you have an immense amount of power in terms of how you write your play. How you draw it. What I've been trying to offer you is ways of making choices so that you can think carefully about what you really want, that point about architecture. You can think carefully about how to go about it. Seeing the connections between things, finding the right people, contacting people before you apply. I want to close just with one final story. What's this a map of? Have you seen it before? What is it? It's the London Tube map. It's very famous. In 1858, when for the first time anywhere in the world people started digging holes underneath London to put trains in them. Now imagine what the population made of that. Nobody's ever dug holes underneath a major city before. And so they dug lots of holes. There were 8 different companies who were given the franchise for the London trains. The 8 companies all produced their map, which showed you where you could go on their train. However, because of competition, not wanting to lose out to the others, they didn't produce a map that linked in with the other ones. So you can see there's a clear problem with this, in that you find yourself under London, and actually your train line is stopped. The other problem they had was that they put all the top features above the ground really clearly. So you could understand what was going on above the ground, but of course, this is completely irrelevant if you're under it. So, in 1931, a gentleman called Harry Betts, an office worker for London Underground, going home one day, suddenly realised that you could actually create a map that had nothing to do with the surface. It's a topological map. Topology means the science of the relationship between things. This map has nothing to do with geography. The distances are all completely wrong. Neither does light travel either in vertical, horizontal, or 45 degrees. That's wrong also. But it made complete sense because the only thing that it really concentrated on was the connections between things. Major stations are little circles, so you don't have that problem anymore of 8 or 9 different lines and how they relate to each other. You know where to get on and where to get off. And the last thing I want to say to you really is this. In terms of thinking about your future, you need to, and your study abroad experience, you need to think about it like the London Underground. Go back to what we said at the beginning, John Ruskin's idea, finding the underlying unity between things. Don't get distracted by surface stuff. Think carefully about how things really connect. And what you need to do in terms of choosing your study abroad experience is actually find the interchange stations, where you can get off one line and onto another one. And you have, in this opportunity, something which no previous generation in the history of the world has had. Nobody before you has been able to take the study abroad experiences that now exist. All the things I've been talking about finding out information, would have been impossible 25 years ago. There was no internet. Neither were there cheap flights. You have an incredible opportunity to change your life, and through doing this, to change the lives of other people. And this, I think, is completely consistent with what Ruskin said at the end of his life when he was asked, why you spent all this time on education? He said this: I did it so that people could understand what it was to see the sky, to breathe the sky, and to live well underneath it. And that's the opportunity that's available to you. Thank you ever so much for listening. It's been a pleasure to talk to you. Thank you.